Well, hey there, everybody. Got a new Q&A for you here. This is something I haven't done in a while. It's been about 4.5 years. And related into your life. Check out gouletpens.com for a lot of what I talked about here today. Hope you have a wonderful next couple of weeks, and I will see you on Valentine's Day. Right on. For those of you that are newer to Goulet Pens, this is a video series that I did from August of 2013 until February of 2020. So COVID disrupted a few things, reformatted into the Pencast. Pencast is going to be on hiatus for the time being. I got to figure out what to do about that. Had some disruptions here recently, and I thought I'm going to stick with what's manageable right now. So Q&A is pretty manageable. It's actually a Q&A that was kind of like birthed the Pencast. I mean, that's kind of an evolution of it. Did it for 7.5 years and going to get back in the saddle here. So if you like pen stuff, it's pretty much what I'm going to stick to here today. So a little bit shorter format, a little bit faster pace on the questions. So yeah, we're going to try this out. Let me know what you think. Could make this a weekly thing. It's kind of maybe the goal, but I'm just taking things one step at a time right now. So we're going to start with this one, see what happens next week. Maybe we'll give it 2 weeks. I feel like every other week would be pretty manageable. Not going to do all the same format that we had in the Pencast because it's going to be kind of a reduced thing. It's going to be more reminiscent of what Goulet Q&A was. So not going to talk as much about like new products and stuff like that. I think we're going to keep that into a separate video. So maybe more on that to come. Still have a lot of video feedback from you all from the survey that we had a month ago. And still sifting through some of that. So we're going to take a look at that, take a look at our time and resources that we have here and see what we can make happen right now. But for today, I can make a Q&A happen. So that's what we're going to roll with. Let's see here. I don't know about doing an audio podcast. I will say that. So let me know if that matters to you. Audio on the Pencast at least was less than 10% of the total viewership that we would have on YouTube. So not insignificant, but it is a bunch of extra steps and stuff like that. And, I'm not exactly sure about that. So let me know what you think. Because again, I'm kind of doing this for you all. So we'll see. One thing that I have right now, this is going to like the infrequency and stuff like that we might have with this. There's been a phrase that Rachel and I have come up with that speaks not just to videos and stuff like this, but kind of most things in our life right now, because we're at that sandwich generation, kind of middle-aged phase of our life, where there's a lot of people that need a lot of things in our various stages of life. So what we said is we can unreliably commit to most of the activities that we have going on. So best of intentions, but legitimate things may come up that steal our time away. Anyway, so I'm going to unreliably commit to doing Q&A. So anyway, this is episode 284, so let's give it a shot here. One thing I did want to mention is that, it's October right now, and now through the end of the year, we're going to have an ink promo deal on everything that is distributed by Jaffa. So that includes Conklin, Monteverde, Delta, Diplomat, Peniter, and Mayora pens. Buy any of those pens, you get a free bottle of Private Reserve Infinity ink. So that's kind of cool. You get 10 different colors to choose from. So yeah, free ink, you just get it. So if you haven't tried the Infinity ink, it's pretty cool stuff. So it's meant to basically last a really long time, even with a pen that doesn't seal well or even kind of left uncapped. So give that a shot if you have any pens that tend to dry out. So if you happen to be needing a pen anyway, you'll get some of this ink and you can give it a shot. All right, I got a bunch of questions for you. So I'm going to kind of just dive right in and we'll see how it goes. All right, first one I got. Which nibs do you prefer for daily writing? Steel, gold, palladium, or titanium? What about when writing for pleasure? Well, if I'm writing with a fountain pen, I'm always writing for pleasure because that's the whole point. No, I'm just kidding. So steel, gold, those are my main two that I use. Palladium basically was just the old Visconti nibs, which I did have some good experiences with those. So I do enjoy some of those, but they're not readily available anymore. And you're pretty much just talking about Visconti nibs. Yes, I like those, but I can't really say I prefer them because they're not like a universal thing. Titanium, they're okay, but they're not like so uniquely different than steel or gold that, I think they're novel and they're kind of interesting. But in terms of the way they write, It's not necessarily getting anything particularly unique there. Most of my nibs are going to be steel and gold, partly because that's what's most available. Now, as to which that I prefer, it really actually depends on the pen. So I will use, you know, TWSBI Ecos, I will use Platinum Preppies, I'll use, you know, definitely stuff on the more affordable kind of entry-level range, and then I'll use gold nibs, you know. I use a Pilot Custom Urushi on a really regular basis as well. So it really spans quite the range. I have learned over time, you know, I've been doing this 15 years now. It's not that I like have to have one or the other. I kind of like appreciate each pen for what it is. And I learn to enjoy and appreciate them for all their different aspects. So for me, it's not necessarily that I lump all the nibs together into one type or category and say, I prefer this, I don't prefer that. They each have their pros and cons, you know. Nice thing about steel nibs, they tend to be more affordable. They tend to be a little stiffer. So if I'm gonna be like on the go, like carrying a notebook around, writing in it, you know, I might be at a conference or I might be, you know, going to a meeting or a doctor's appointment or something like that, I'm generally gonna lean a little more towards a steel nib because, you know, if I'm writing, like holding the notebook in my lap, you know, I carry one of those like traveler's notebooks, so their leather cover is kind of floppy. You know, a gold nib might be a little difficult to get like consistent pressure with that. So the fact that it's, you know, they're usually a little more bendy, some of that's going to be lost in the feeling if you have, you know, a gold nib or whatever. Sorry, I got a notification on my computer. I thought I turned that off, but here we go. There we go. All right, so yeah, gold nib, it tends to be a little bouncier. So I prefer to use those actually when I'm sitting like at a desk or something like that. So around the office, I'm a little more inclined maybe to use gold nibs because I can appreciate the more subtlety of the gold nibs. Generally speaking, if I'm at like a fixed place, kind of writing things down. Whereas if I'm on the go, might be a little more inclined to have a steel nib. So, but again, it really depends. I'm not super hard and fast. When it comes to writing pleasure, I would say that I do probably tend to prefer the gold nibs just because I personally like slightly bouncier, slightly wetter nibs. And you tend to get that more with gold nibs. So if it's purely for pleasure and we're not talking price or practicality, I'll pretty much go gold nibs. But if it's, you know, just nibs on the go, you know, LAMY steel nibs, TWSBI nibs, LAMY 2000, that's a gold nib. I do carry that around a lot because that pen's super practical. Yeah, I keep that one in my notebook, and it's a gold nib, but it writes pretty stiff. You can not necessarily probably tell it's gold because it doesn't really have like the flexibility or anything that you might tend to associate with gold nibs. But anyway, there you go. Pilot nibs, I love Pilot nibs. Those are some of my good like writing for pleasure ones, but there's a lot of good ones out there. Next question we got, have you ever found an ink pen pairing that made you want to use that pen more often? Yeah, I mean, I think that the right ink pen pairing is kind of the goal, right? Like, I mean, any fountain pen you use, yes, you can put whatever fountain pen ink that you want in there, but you know, there's different saturation levels, there's different degrees of flow, there's different dry time and, you know, saturation, all this type of stuff, you know, so it's like, you do get all these variables, you know, not only the type of pen, but the nib and all that kind of stuff, and nib size, you know, it can really change the look of an ink if you have the nib, and then the paper, of course, too, is a factor. So really, it's the three of those things that play together. I call it the trifecta of fountain pens, ink, pen, and paper. So the ink, and I would say if you have like a base level paper, like most people probably have papers that they tend to prefer to use, and they just kind of stick with that, unless they're like, you know, hunting around trying to find something better. But you know, most of us tend to like find a paper we like and then just kind of roll with that. So it's really the ink and the pen that we're like changing up more often. So, you know, this is part of the goal, right? Like for me, fountain pens are kind of like the pinnacle of the writing experience, right? In terms of writing feel and, you know, getting a kind of a flow state of writing, especially if you're writing cursive, you can write a little faster. It's just, I don't know, for me, it hits like my brain hits kind of a different wavelength, and I'm able to write you know, a little differently than I can when I'm writing in print, because it's like my handwriting in print is not very good. It feels very like stop and start. Not that, you know, that's just me. A lot of people write in print and it's perfectly fine. I just, you know, have really preferred writing in cursive with fountain pens. It just felt natural to me from the first time I used a fountain pen. So, you know, for me, I think using them for so long, like you learn what pairings that you really like. I definitely have some kind of go-to pens. I definitely have some go-to inks. You know, I've talked about them a lot in my videos. You know, Robert Oster Blue Water Ice is a good ink that I go to a lot. Urban Emerald Trevor, I use that one a lot. You know, there's a few go-tos. Diamond Red Dragon, I really like some of these. So, you know, I would say that there's a few inks that I like that tend to be pretty universally well-behaved. A Pilot Konpeki, you know, that I'll put in just about any pen. But there are definitely some, if you're more on the like extreme end of the scale, so if you have a pen that's particularly wet or particularly dry, you know, maybe you have a nib size that, you know, is a little too thin to your liking, so you want a really wet ink, you know, then you can choose an ink that like has more extreme kind of wet property or absorbs more into the paper or something like that. So I would find that like most pens and inks is kind of like a bell curve, right? Like standard distribution here. So it's like most pens and inks are going to fall in the kind of the bell of the curve. And then on the outskirts there, you're going to have ones that are, you know, particularly wet or dry, or the nibs are particularly small or large or whatever it might be. And then you would actually notice more of a difference in using different properties, especially if like a nib that's particularly stingy and an ink that's particularly wet. It can kind of come together and fit more in the middle of that bell. So, you know, that to me, so, you know, it's like, yeah, have I found a pen and ink pairing made? Yeah. I can't really say like one particular pen and ink pairing because I have a lot of them that I have kind of gone to over the years. You know, I do like, so just one example is I carry a, you know, little traveler's pen with me in my, normally I have it in my pocket, but here it is right here. So this one is really good for, you know, it's a fine nib. So it's like, I generally prefer slightly broader nibs because I really like deep saturated color. But what I do with that one is I tend to put Diamond Red Dragon in it because it's a very saturated color. It's a very bold color. So in a finer nib, I still get, you know, kind of the easy viewability, easy readability, you know, of a bolder ink, but in a finer nib like that because this pen's only available in that fine nib. So that's an, you know, not that you can't put any other ink in here, but that's a really good, you know, pairing that I've come up with that I like for my like on-the-go pen. So it's kind of neat. So yeah, you'll just pick up little things like that over time. And I'd say like, you know, you get a wide variety of experiences using different pens, nibs, different inks. And that's part of the journey of fountain pens, right? So, I mean, I like being able to personalize it. It's kind of like a double-edged sword though. It's like not any one pen or ink is going to behave the same with everything else, you know? So it's like over time you do kind of learn, you know, how to dial it in. Yeah, it's kind of fun. It's part of the fun, right? All right, next one. Have you, Goulet Company, thought of making a 100% Goulet pen again? We do get asked this a lot. Have I thought about it? Yes. Are we going to? No. And I'll nuance that a little bit because 100% Goulet pen, you know, maybe I'm taking this answer to the extreme, but like, I'm not going to make my own nibs and feeds and converters and all that stuff. Like even major manufacturers, there's going to be some parts and stuff that they're going to outsource and they're going to, you know, have made and then, you know, unless you have like the biggest companies, you know, then they might make everything in-house if it's all proprietary stuff. But generally speaking, I mean, there's a lot of different companies out there that are, you know, having Yovo or Bach make their nibs or whoever else, right? And there's a lot of other companies that like, they do what's called OEM. You know, it's like they'll have a manufacturer who specializes more in, say, clips or, you know, plating or something like that. They'll outsource that part of it. They'll design it and they'll, you know, make it custom, but they may not actually manufacture the thing. So if you're taking the question literally 100% Goulet pen, that's never going to happen because I'm not going to be getting into plating and, you know, all that kind of stuff. That sounds like a lot of work, and we would never be operating in that scale for that to make any sense for us. It makes way more sense to work with people that like do that kind of stuff all day long and specialize. So, you know, could we go to like a higher degree of manufacturing than what we currently do, which is basically not much. Right now, we're really not a manufacturer. I handmade pens back in the day, which, you know, was fine, but even then I was buying like pen kits and I was essentially just turning like the barrels and I was, you know, assembling it all together and, you know, all that kind of stuff. I wasn't tuning the nibs because I didn't know what I was doing back then. And I didn't sell that many fountain pens. Most of it was rollerballs and stuff back in the day. But yeah, I mean, we could theoretically get into some higher degree of assembly or, you know, customization or nib tuning grinding or, you know, have some aspects of manufacturing. But like, you know, if we're talking like having CNC lathes and injection molding equipment and all that kind of stuff, it's like, that's a huge investment, and doesn't really make sense unless you're going to be like starting a whole brand and making that like regularly available. So in the time that I've stopped making pens, which was 15 years ago, and the time that we are now here talking about this, I have definitely learned to appreciate what fountain pen manufacturers do and how specialized it is, how difficult fountain pens actually are to manufacture. There's a lot of parts and pieces to them, and they have to have some pretty fine tolerances to be able to work right. And frankly, there's just really good people that make really good pens. So we have done a lot of retailer exclusives where we'll design things in collaboration, and you know, we'll have some input into what the final product is going to be, but it's essentially still the brand that makes it that we, you know, we still have their branding on it and stuff like that. So it's more of a collaboration than it is us actually manufacturing, or what's known as white labeling, which is like, you know, if you go to the, you know, a Walmart or a Target or something like that, and you know, they have like store brand products, you know, Up and Up at Target. You know, Target does not have factories where they're making aspirin and, you know, apple juice or whatever the heck it might be. You know, they are having somebody that makes that stuff, you know, make it for them and then just put their label on it, and then they sell it directly. So, you know, theoretically we could do that. We could just have a major manufacturer make a white label pen and we just sell it under our own brand. Sure, we could do that, but honestly, like, I haven't, unless we were to really do something custom or like source out a bunch of different parts and pieces and then like assemble it ourselves, which I guess we always could. I don't think it would really be advantageous to not have the branding of the company that makes the pen, because it's a pretty small industry, like y'all know, and kind of respect different brands for different reasons. And it kind of makes sense to give them credit for where it's due, and we just, you know, we just kind of sell it exclusively. So it's definitely something I'm open to. It's something we've talked about as a team, but it's not something that I'm like, you know, absolutely like on the edge of my seat getting ready to do, unless I see some distinct advantage to doing that, which, you know, maybe something will come to me, I don't know. But never say never, but actually manufacturing entire pens is not likely to ever happen for us. All right, next question. Are there real risks in not washing fountain pens and storing them for months until you wash them? So I do this all the time unintentionally because I really like inking up pens more than I like cleaning them out. And I have a lot of pens. So it's very easy for me to just be like, oh, I'll clean this out later. I'll just grab this other pen that's like right next to it. You know, I have, you know, you name it, I've got 20 pens like right here at my desk. And so, yeah, it's pretty easy for me to just ink up something else. And then, you know, time slips away because what even is time anymore these days? So yeah, it's very easy for stuff to just sit there for a while. And I'll say like most pens are fine. Like you don't have to really worry about it for a couple of months. Some pens will dry out and you have to then, you know, more thoroughly clean them out. It's kind of annoying, but I've never, in my experience, at least with most of my pens, I've never had like any truly adverse effects other than it's just a lot of time that you got to spend cleaning them out. Now there are definitely certain types of pen materials and certain pens that, you know, like certain vintage pens and stuff like that, that maybe are a little more difficult to clean out, where it can really be kind of annoying and, you know, may not even be particularly good for the pen. It kind of depends on the ink too. If you have like an iron gall ink, those can be a little harsher on the pen. Certain inks have different chemistry to them. So I'm not going to say universally like all pens would be fine. But, you know, from my experience, my team's experience, and just talking to a lot of people over the years who use pens, it's not something I would be like super worried about, like necessarily doing that unless you have particularly valuable or rare pens or things that are unique materials, you know, celluloids and stuff like that that could stain, or I don't know. There's different considerations to take into account, but I think it's more like it's just a general practice. If you, like me, tend to ink up a lot of pens and then just move on to other pens. I'll say like a do what I say and not what I do kind of a thing. But, you know, basically, if you know that you're going to be setting a pen aside for a long time and not using it, you might as well just go ahead and clean it out, because you're going to have to clean it out again anyway. And if I inked up a pen 3 weeks ago and realistically I might not use it again for 3 months, I might as well clean it out. And then I have just a clean pen sitting there for 3 months instead of a pen that is then going to be more stubborn to clean out. In practicality, that's not how it usually ends up working in my life. So I just get really good at cleaning, deep cleaning pens. So yeah, I would say in practice, that's the more ideal way to do it. But you're not going to get any judgment from me if you leave your pen sitting for a while and they get all crusty and you have to use pen flush and a feed brush and all kinds of tricks to get it cleaned out. All right, next question. This is a non-pen related one, but it says, Brian, McLaren F1 versus current generation McLarens, Speedtail, etc. So I've talked before about my childhood love of the McLaren F1. I'm a child of the 90s, and that car was the supercar of the 90s. Pretty much didn't get better than that, in my opinion, in a lot of people's opinion. So I'm not like a supercar guy anymore, but I do like supercars. They're kind of neat. So the F1 is iconic and nostalgic for me. And so for that reason, I would probably just pick the F1. I haven't kept up with the cars recently, other than playing like Forza and stuff like that. But if I won the lottery and I was to be on the market for one of these cars, because I would really have to win like a big lottery. If it was a car that I'd be driving regularly, the F1 would be a little tough. It is not a daily driver car. It's really meant to be a race car. The P1 maybe would be a little bit more practical if you can say that car is practical. They didn't make a lot of those. It was kind of like a spiritual successor of the F1. I still kind of like the look of the F1 a little better. Maybe that's just me. Maybe it's just because it's nostalgic, but I really think that design is ahead of its time. If it's something currently made, then I'd maybe go with the GTS. Again, I knew nothing about the GTS or the P1 really, because I just looked at their website last night as I was prepping for this video, and I was like, oh, these seem pretty cool, and I've read up a little bit about them, but in reality, these are not cars that I'm ever going to experience in my life. I'd be shocked if I ever even saw one. But as I've gone through and kind of thought about it more, yeah, I think the F1 would actually be the top one for me to heck with it. None of these are going to be practical as a daily driver, but the F1 would be super iconic, and yeah, that's what I would pick. So, yep, sticking with the childhood car. And if I can think of it later, I'll put up a picture that I have from, I think, probably 8th grade, where I drew a McLaren F1. I just found it like a week or two ago, so I'll put that up. I don't draw a lot of cars these days, but I was into them in middle school for sure. All right. Y'all enjoy this next one. Very simple. It just says, pen puns, please. Well, I do have some pen-related jokes. Now, a lot of these, I may have told some of these before. I don't know. I do keep spreadsheets of my various jokes and puns and things like that. But I tell them like to various members of the team and my family and all kinds of stuff. I don't remember where I've said them when at this point. So forgive me if I repeat any. But all of these are jokes that I have pretty much adapted from somewhere else and then turned them into fountain pen jokes. So I've got like a dozen of them. So we'll just kind of roll through them, and I'll leave plenty of room for you to laugh in between, because I'm sure that you're, going to just be guffawing. But if you're not into these at all, just go ahead and skip to the next question. You don't have to listen to these. Okay, so first one, here we go. I used to get a small shock whenever I touched my pens. Needless to say, I'm ecstatic. Did you hear about the new anti-gravity pen? It's impossible to grab one. Why wasn't the fountain pen popular on Instagram? Because it would never post. Want to hear a joke about a broken nib? Never mind, it's pointless. What do you call a factory that makes adequate pens? A satisfactory. Did you know that some guy stole my annual planner? He got 12 months. Did you hear that they're going to have a new outdoor pen show? It's supposed to be intense. Get it? Intense. Tense. Intense. I have the entire drawer filled with pen caps. They look so lonely there because they have no body. I keep looking for camouflage pens, but I can't seem to find any. What's blue and it smells like red ink? Blue ink. I was considering becoming a Nibmeister, but I heard that it's a grind. And I might discontinue selling planners because their days are numbered. And did you hear about the new Apocalypse pen? They're selling like there's no tomorrow. There you go. Enjoy. Feel free to use those. It's just a gift to the world. All right, next question. If you wanted to build a structure from safaris and adhesive, what would you build? Well, I do like building stuff. I've never considered building anything out of safaris and adhesive, so this did get my wheels turning a little bit. I think it would be very meta to make a sculpture or statue or whatever you want to call it of a giant safari made out of smaller safaris. I don't know why. I just think that'd be kind of fun. You could have like different color safaris. You know, you have like, I don't know, gray ones or silver or whatever the heck for like the clip, and I don't know. It seems fun. I guess you'd have to make it pretty big if you wanted to have a lot of detail, but why not? We're dreaming, right? I will say, and maybe what gave me the idea is in LAMY's headquarters in Heidelberg, they actually had an art piece that was a bunch of all-stars that were sort of connected together. It wasn't like it was, I guess, sort of a sculpture, I guess. But it wasn't like a particular design, like shape or design. It was more of like a, whatever, kind of an organic web of these all-stars. But it was pretty cool. So, you know, something like that. But I guess the safaris would have to be more like compact together if you're gonna make a whole pen out of them. Or, you know, a bridge. I don't know why, but I think a bridge made out of pens would be cool. I think about, there's a show called Lego Masters that Fox did a number of years ago. And I watched that with my kids. That was good fun. And one of the episodes that stuck out to me the most was a contest where they had to build a bridge. And, you know, everybody was making, and it had to like hold a certain amount of weight, or whoever held the most weight won the challenge or whatever it was. And everybody went to using Lego Technic because they thought of that as like the more structural, you know, whatever. But there was one couple on there who used just regular Lego plates and stuck all the plates together, and they were so much stronger than anything anybody else designed. It was amazing. And that was like just stuck in my mind because I built a lot of Lego stuff. My son is still obsessed with Legos, has been for a decade now. But yeah, the strength of just regular Legos locking together plates would be kind of cool. So maybe that's why the bridge thing is on my mind. None of that would be applicable to using pens and adhesive, but I don't know. I guess like if you think about like a steel bridge, you know, with like all the, you know, whatever the cross braces and all that kind of stuff, seems like pens would be natural for that kind of a thing. So I don't know. We'll see. If I happen to have a few hundred safaris laying around one day, maybe I'll give it a shot. All right. Another question here. What are your favorite Sheening inks? I do have some favorites. There's a lot of decent Sheening inks, and I will say I empathize with all of you who want a Sheening ink filter on our site because we do not have one, and I basically had to go through all the inks and go from memory. So I didn't go through all 800 colors, but I got a good list together here. So I'll share with you, you know, those ones, and it's like, you know, I was only going to spend so much time going through everything, but these are the ones that really jumped out to me. Organic Studio Nitrogen. That ink is a pain, but it's a monster sheener. I mean, if that's what you think of when you think of a Sheening ink. Organic Studio has several other really good Sheening inks, but blue's my favorite color, so Nitrogen definitely just like jumps out at me. Another blue that is a little bit less maintenance to have to deal with, but is still a nice blue, little brighter, a little less intense sheen, is Diamine Blue Velvet. And it comes in a cool like cheese wedge kind of a bottle. And then another nice Diamine ink is Polar Glow. That one's pretty similar to Blue Velvet, but it comes in a different shaped bottle. That's kind of neat too. Emerald of Chivor, that's been a longtime favorite of mine. It does have shimmer in it, so it's a little less of like pure sheener, but it does have a pretty hefty sheen as well. But I like that ink all around, and so the sheening properties are nice. Another monster sheener that's a heavy green sheen is LAMY Azurite. If you want to see that thing sheen, you can check it out on my video that I did for the LAMY Dark Lilac ink that came back earlier this year. I show Azurite as well as the new Dark Lilac actually sheens pretty heavy too. So you can check those out in that video. And then last one I have is Diamine Holly. So this is like a dark green with a red sheen. Most of the sheen tends to be red or like some kind of greenish, you know, kind of hue. I don't know why exactly. I think it just has to do with the dye properties that make it sheen, but you're not going to get a sheen in like every color. So most of them tend to be kind of in that red family. So there you go. Those are some of my favorite sheening inks. And then to parlay off of that, another really good question here is, are sheening inks bad for vintage pens? I'm not going to say they're great for vintage pens. You know, sheening inks do tend to be a little bit higher maintenance. You know, just especially on the feeds, like whatever the ink is like kind of drying anywhere, it's going to leave that sheen. So if you have a feed, pretty much whatever pen you're using, it's gonna sheen that kind of sheeny color. It can clean off, and it's not like the biggest pain in the world. But if you leave it sitting in there for a while and it really dries up and, you know, stuff like that, it is going to be more work. And especially if you have like a demonstrator of any kind. I don't know if sheening inks have any sort of additional properties to them that are more problematic for vintage filling mechanisms, because a lot of vintage pens had sacks that were used for either lever fillers or some button fillers or you know, crescent fillers, coin fillers. There's a lot of bladder filling, you know, aerometrics. There's a lot of bladders being used back in the day. I don't know if the heavy sheening inks are more problematic for those. So I'm not quite sure. And I don't know if like vintage materials, like things like ebonite and casein and, you know, whatever other materials, bakelite, or maybe it's called bakelite, I'm not sure. Celluloids, you know, I'm not sure if those have more of a tendency to stain with heavy sheening inks. I would think that that's mostly what you'd be dealing with these heavy sheening inks is a tendency to stain and make it difficult to remove that kind of sheeny color out of there. Again, most sheens tend to be either like in the red or sort of greenish family, like yellowish greenish. So I would think that that would be more of an issue, is that whatever that sheening color would kind of stick around and make it difficult to like fully clean out of the pen. I've never heard of sheening inks being used in vintage pens causing a problem like damage to the pen or clogging or any type of like functional issue. Maybe it would, I'm not sure. I haven't like thoroughly tested that or anything. I just really haven't come across that feedback one way or the other. So which lends me to believe that maybe it's not a huge concern, but you know, to each their own. It's kind of a use at your own risk type of scenario. So I would say, generally speaking, if you have some non-vintage pens, maybe just stick to those for your sheening and your shimmering inks. Anything with like, you know, iron gall, like anything with, you know, unique properties to it, maybe just tend to stick with more modern pens that are a little more replaceable should something go awry. But it's totally up to you. It's totally up to you. If you have any more experience in that, then, you know, feel free to leave some notes in the comments. I haven't had any particular experiences to share one way or the other with that. I think because my natural tendency is to not use heavy sheening inks in my vintage pens. So maybe I just haven't really tested that for myself yet, because it was my natural inclination just to kind of avoid that. All right, and then this is actually my last question for this week. I really am kind of rolling through here. What is the wildest thing someone has said to you once they found out what your job is? I do get a variety of reactions. Most of them are more in the inquisitive, hard to believe kind of category. So a very common one that I run across is fountain pens, they still make those? You know, or people are like, oh, you know, is that the pens with the feathers on them? And I'm like, no, that's a quill. That's like going back like 100 years too far. Like, you know, and that's fine. Like most people don't know. Another thing along the line of like, oh, fountain pens, they still make those is, like that's really a job? You're like, you really have a company doing that? I'm like, yeah, we do. It's weird, I know. At this point, I'm not surprised because I've pretty much heard it all. Do have an interesting story. This is one I was flying one time, going through security, and I was trying to get to my plane. I was maybe a little bit behind, so I was kind of trying to roll through, and I had a bunch of pens with me, and so the TSA agent was like, what are all these pens? I said, oh, they're fountain pens. I sell fountain pens, and they were like, fountain pen, and they were like genuinely trying to understand what a fountain pen was, and it just stuck out to me because I've never explained it and had somebody like just totally not get it. And in combination with me, I was just like, I had my shoes off and my belt, I was trying to go through security. So I really want to get into a whole dissertation about it. So they were thinking, they were like, does the pen like come up out of the fountain? They were thinking like a water fountain with like a pen coming out of it or something. And I was like, yeah, sure, that's what it is. So I felt kind of bad because they're going to be forever confused now. But, again, I was kind of on a mission to get through security. So, and then I did have an interesting experience. So I was at a networking type thing for business. There was it was like a murder mystery dinner theater type thing. So it was already a little weird because we didn't know that that's what had been planned, so it was this networking group and we all kind of knew each other and we're trying to like talk to each other about business stuff. And then there's just like these strangers kind of walking around, kind of making a little bit of a racket. And we're like, this is weird. Why are these people here? And they're kind of like dressed up in like, 3-piece suits and stuff like that. And you're just like, this is kind of odd. Like we're on like shorts and flip-flops. So it was a little odd. And then we were eventually like, I think this might be like a dinner theater type thing, like a surprise dinner theater type thing, which it was. But it was really confusing because, they were going around and just kind of like talking and interacting with us, So one of the guys dressed up like kind of like this 1930s mobster type comes and sits down at our table. And he starts talking and he goes, okay, so what do you do? And I was like, oh, I sell fountain pens. He was like, really? I was like, yeah. He's like, what's your company? I was like, oh, Goulet Pens. He was like, no way. And I was like, is this part of the show? Because I didn't know if like, because it was like a networking thing. I didn't know if they like did some research about our companies beforehand and were working that into the show. But he seemed to like sort of break character a little bit. It was like, no way. He's like, I have a LAMY Safari, blah, blah, blah. And he starts going off like legitimately about fountain pen stuff. And I was like, man, this guy's really done his research. No, it turns out that was not part of the show. He legitimately was a fan and a customer and was like fanboying out and talking to me about pens. So our guy that was at our table, it totally kind of messed up the dinner theater experience for us, but it was very entertaining. I do not get recognized in public very much, but that wasn't even really in public. That wasn't like a private group, but I was because this was in California. This is like clear across the country, not a place where I would think that anybody would, I'd run into somebody that I knew, or that knew me. So that was really entertaining. So that one definitely sticks out in my mind. So yeah, there you go. Those are some of my experiences of talking to different people about what my job is. It just never ceases to amaze me. Now I think it's like, kind of legitimate, I guess, because like e-commerce in general is less weird. And people, you can buy all kinds of crazy stuff on the internet. So I get a lot less of those like, really? Like that's an actual job? I get less of that now than I did maybe 10 years ago. But it still is kind of interesting when people, don't know that fountain pens are really still a thing. And that's where I'm like, oh yeah, here, you should try one, and then it's like a whole thing. But anyway, it's kind of fun. So there you go. So just 10 questions for today. I did kind of roll right through them. So it's going to be a little shorter show today, which is kind of the goal. I'm trying to keep this somewhat manageable for myself. But this is kind of fun. So I will say, I need more questions. So I did source some of these out. Most of these are from Instagram. But I didn't necessarily want to commit to even doing this for a show, so I didn't solicit questions for them anywhere. However, if you've got questions that you would like for me to answer in this type of a format, by all means, feel free to ask them here on YouTube for sure. But honestly, I will say, I didn't do a lot of deep dives on this one, but I'm certainly game for that. And if you have no idea what the Goulet Q&A thing is, there's 283 previous episodes that you can check out. You'll see a much younger Brian with weight fluctuation up and down and all around over those 7.5 years that I had the previous recordings. But yeah, it's definitely check those out. See if you like the vibe. I definitely enjoy sitting down and just talking pen stuff. It's fun for me to kind of prep it and do some research. Most of the time I'm doing like CEO business things, that honestly have nothing to do with pens at all. It's just like regular running a company kind of stuff, looking at spreadsheets and metrics and talking to people and stuff like that. But when I do get my hands on some pens and talk about some nerdy pen stuff, I don't know, I really enjoy that. So I would be fun doing this on a more regular basis, but let me know what you think. Goulet Q&A coming back. What do you think? Is it a regular thing? Should I just hang it up and never do it again? I'm just kidding. Even if you say that, I'll probably ignore that and just do what I want anyway. So definitely ask me some questions for future episodes, and let me know if you do want an audio version, because that's something I will say. The technical limitation of the audio thing is like Goulet Q&A is its own series, so I don't necessarily want to put it into like the Pencast audio feed. So it would kind of need to be its own thing, but we used to do Q&A. However, that was years ago, and the audio portion then was really not listened to very much at all. So I don't even think we still have that audio feed. So I would need to start a new podcast feed. But then it's like, do I upload 283 previous episodes and then start with the 284th? Or do I just start with 284 and be like, sorry, you missed out on 7.5 years of content? I don't know. I could use your feedback on that. If it's the upload 283 previous episodes, that would be a lot of work. I don't know that would be practical. But anyway, I'm curious what you think anyway. And then I do have a question of the week for you. So this is something that I used to do in my previous Goulet Q&As. This is something to make you think a little bit and to give some feedback and conversation in the comments. So my question of the week for you, it is October, Halloween is around the corner. I'm curious, what is your opinion on Halloween-themed pens? Or Halloween, related to like whether it's like Dracula, Frankenstein, that type of stuff. Do you have any? Or like pumpkin theme, that type of stuff, like, black and orange, black and red, whatever. Do you have any Halloween-themed pens? And if you do you just use them like around October for like Halloween season, I guess? Or do you use them year-round? I'm genuinely curious because I am kind of perplexed sometimes when there's like specific holiday-themed fountain pens. I'm like, it doesn't seem to me like it would be like universal appeal for something like this because they are so specific. But people do like them and people do buy them. So I'm really curious what you think about them. It's on my mind because Halloween's right around the corner. Anyway, that's what I got for you this week. We'll see how this thing goes. Let's see if there's a 285. I don't know. We've done a lot of series over the years, and I'm at a point now where I'm like, you know what? Let's go with good enough. So hopefully this episode's good enough. If not, you'll let me know. And if so, also let me know. That would be nice. It'd be nice to get some positive feedback every now and then. So that's what I got for you. I hope you really enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you around. Right on.